going on, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Seen last video we were porting out our intake manifold, got the runners all straightened out, got the plenum up area up in here all cleaned up, got the ports and runners all uniform going all the way down. So now that that's done, we're going to start cleaning up our heads. We're going to get this guy here all dirty, missing some valves, except for those ones. I'm going to show you, I didn't take those ones out, so I'm going to show you what the valve seats look like and how to seal and how they're sealing now, and then how to clean them up and then retest them. We'll eventually get it all looking like this one. Surface all cleaned up, new valves put in place, and new valve springs to match our cam. So I'll get myself cleaned up. I'll get myself set up, and then we'll start going over the heads. All right, you see we got our head set up on our little stands. Got the valves in. And we're gonna put some, I started spraying it, but anyways, we're gonna put show you what the valves, these valves were in the car when I melted the #1 piston on the 289. It sent aluminum through the whole block, or from the piston or piston material through the whole block. So we're gonna put WD-40 on here. If you're going to do this at home, just make sure that the head's flat. If you want to check your valve seats, how they're sealing, just kind of put it in there, just enough to go around the perimeter or the outside of the valve. For the most part, it'll hold it. Just so you know, I'm not playing. Springs are installed. Those are the springs out of this head. So I'm going to take my little air gun here. We're not going to open it up all the way, but I'll go ahead and we'll stick the little end inside the intake runner just underneath the valve. And you'll see all that air escape through the valve. I barely cracking open the air nozzle. So we'll do the same with the exhaust. Get that up in there. Bang. So as you can see, these valves aren't sealing at all, and that's caused from all the piston material from when I melted the #1 piston in that car to go through the whole block. It did it to every single valve except for one of the valve, or two valves I did find that were bent. That was the whole reasoning for me ordering a complete valve set. And the springs I had in these heads didn't quite match the new cam specs, so the kit I ordered came with the springs closest to my cam, or what the cam called for, and it's really close. But right now I'm gonna get myself set up. We'll get this head tore apart, get the new valves, and then I'll show you how I lap the valves in, and then we'll do another test. Show you what the seats look like before we lap the valves in, lap the new valves in, and then we'll do another test with the same springs to show you the difference, and then we'll install my new springs and show you what they do there. So get myself set up, get this thing tore apart. Tore apart, washed up, cleaned up, put back on our bench. Now I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what the valve seats look like right now. And there they are, all their glory. See, they're pretty shiny and it's hard to tell, but if you get on some angles, you'll see the color difference between the edge of that seat coming back over. You tilt, you see it's a little bit darker where the exhaust gases were kind of escaping through. And if you run your finger, I can run my finger across it, and I can feel the material left over from the piston on both the exhaust and the intake here. You can see this, the sealing edge all the way around. They all look pretty decent, but all of them have quite a bit of piston material left on them. And especially, you can really tell on the exhaust valves where it changes color from the gases going by. You see it's kind of shiny there. Come over here, the farther you get around towards here, you can see it just the drastic color change. So before we lap the new valves in, we're going to coat each one of the, it's a trick a buddy of mine showed me. If you don't have the dye, you can use a Sharpie. Just color in on top, keep it in the lines, you know. But color in all the shiny parts of the valve seats. And then we'll start using, start lapping in the new valves. I've got some, I use 400 grit. It's fine. You don't need a lot of it. It goes really fast. And there's two ways you can lap a valve in. I'm going to use a drill as soon as I find it. And I have a, basically just the, let me see if I can find it here for you. There it is. I don't put the drill directly to the valve. Use yourself a bolt, cut the head off it, put a rubber hose on there. That way if anything happens, if the valve for some reason sticks or you put pressure on it, it doesn't want to gald up the valve stem itself or damage your valve guide. So, but I'll get myself set up, draw in on the valve seats there, and we'll start lapping in some valves. Alright, see all the shiny's gone. All the valve seats have been colored in. Got outside the line on a couple of them, but I think it'll be okay. Now all the marker does is kind of give us a reference line, or it allows us to see the sealing surface of the, or the mating surface between the new valves and the seats. So I don't usually color in on the valves. Oops. But here's whoops. There's my valve kit. I do 2 at a time. Now, the easiest way to do all this too as well is do 1 head at a time. That way you don't get all mixed up, get your valves mixed up. But if for any reason you got a little close there. But if for any reason you want to do multiple heads, get yourself a piece of cardboard, draw on it, number 1, number 2, make sure you got the front marked. And I like to put the E's in the I's, or well, exhaust and intake. And yeah, so now that I got that, go ahead and get set up, start lapping the valve. All right, so this is the number 2 head. We'll go ahead and flip it around real quick. I use a screwdriver and my little hammer just on the very front. So you know it's the front. Just mark 2. And of course, if it's number 1, you just mark number 1, or mark something, or draw on it, just so you know you don't mix it up. So you don't want to mix your valves up. After you lap them in, the last thing you want to do is put the wrong valve in the wrong seat, and they haven't been mated properly. And you'll end up with just the biggest problem as you did before you even lapped the valves in. So, here's our new intake valve here. As you can see, I can get the focus in on there for you. There's no marks. They're fresh. Take my little compound. Now you can take it, just whatever's usually left on the cap, or in a tube, depending on what tubes would probably be easier, but this is how I got it in the cap. And I just kind of scrape what's on the cap, put it on the edge of the valve there. Take your finger. You don't need a whole lot, just kind of rub it off and just put a thin coat along where it would seal against the seat. Make sure you got a just nice thin coat all the way around. Now you don't want to leave any excess on there, so if you can, just go ahead and take the excess off the top there. There. You can see it's all the way around the sealing surface of the valve. Take the excess off, put it back in your cup. Put the cap back on. And now before you put it in put it in the hole, get yourself a little bit of oil in a cap somewhere. Just put a little bit of oil on the end of your valve stem. That way it coats the valve guide as you're spinning it. Keeps it lubricated, keeps it from golding or ruining it. Then just put her in the guide. I like to spin it, make sure it's all the way around. Drop it in. Take your head. Take your nifty little tool here made of a bolt and a hose. Put your finger against the valve. I like to push it all the way on to where it's about anywhere between 3/4 of an inch to an inch over the valve stem. Get your drill hooked up. Don't put it on drill for whatever. I like to give it a reason. If it does bind up, it slips as well. So, and then just spin her slowly, moving her back. If you need any pressure, put your finger on the valve face and just kind of give it a light, in the center of the valve, of course, and just give it a light push, just to kind of help it so you're not pulling. If you pull on this too much, you could pull the hose off, or it's kind of a funny feeling. So I use my finger and just spin it. You don't have to go full speed, and you'll hear it kind of, the noise it's making. And just move it in and out. And it doesn't take much. Okay, so we got that off. Now another thing I like to do too, because sometimes the hose is kind of a pain to get off the valve stem. So I can over just a wrench that's bigger than the valve stem itself, put it between the hose, and just kind of help pull it off. Just help slips, but don't drag the wrench against the valve stem. Kind of defeats the purpose of not golding it. And it just pops right off. Another thing that helps too, when you put the little oil on the valve stem itself and put it in there, don't wipe it off the end of the hose. Just kind of put this in here. That's another reason why you want to use your finger to kind of push it, because sometimes this will slide off. Now you got that spun, turn it around, push your valve out. And I like to make sure too, like so, if you put your finger over the valve guide itself and pull up, you'll feel a suction. That's good. And I'm holding it, that's got air. Take your finger off the valve guide, it falls. Pull it. That's a pretty good indication that your valve guide is still good. And I like to hear a little pop. Now some valve guides will make a louder pop than others. Don't be too concerned. It's just probably a little bit more wore out than other. But if you pull on the valve and you still feel a tiny bit of a suction, or it makes a slight pop, then you're okay. So I'm going to just take a rag, kind of wipe it all off. Now I'm going to show you what your valve face looks like now after it's been lapped into that valve seat. And you'll see that it's been lapped in and cut to fit with our lapping compound, that sealing surface on the valve seat itself. Come over to your little cardboard box. We got marked number 2, intake valve. Put your intake valve in there. holds it in place. You can set it down over here, out of the way, and it helps keep it in line. Take our little rag, wipe out the intake valve seat there, and then I'll show you what it looks like as well. All right, there's our intake valve seat, and you can see it was colored like all those other ones, all the other intakes. Let me get a little closer there. You can see that it's cut its path. Now that's a nice, good, even path all the way around. Looks pretty good. To me, that looks like a good sealing surface. So now I'm going to get going on the exhaust valve here. I'll get that valve lapped in as well, and then I'll go ahead and reassemble, put the 2 new valves in the holes using the old springs, and then we'll do it and I'll show you the difference from the first time we tested before lapping to what it is now with the old springs, and then we'll remove those springs and put in my new springs, and I'll show you the difference between those two. I'll also show you the pressure difference with my little valve spring pressure tool or pressure checker. So yeah, I'll get this exhaust valve lapped in, and then we'll go to, I'll show you what how it comes out. All right, valves are reinstalled using the original springs that were in it. I can get that off there. Make sure they're not touching. Yep, we're good. So springs are installed. Do the same thing we did before. Go ahead and put some WD-40 in there, just enough to cover around the valves. Don't want to get too crazy. So, as you can see, plenty of WD-40 in there. Grab my little air hose, and then we'll go around, back inside the intake port just like I did before, up underneath the valve. Now, I've got it open the same as it was before. It's nothing. So turn up the pressure. See, nothing coming out. So I'm going to set you up on the camera there and then put a rag in the hole, plug it up, and see if I can hold more pressure behind that valve. See if we can get it to leak. All right, got my air blower here. Got some paper towels. Stuff it in the hole there. See that? See if we can hold some back pressure in there. There we go. I don't know if you can see it. We'll shut that thing off for you for a minute. The focus, if I can get it to focus in, let's see. Oh, no, I can't. But pay attention to that area on the screen there. It's the only area where there's escaping air, and it's very, very small. The little air bubbles are smaller than the end of a ballpoint pen. And since I have you there, we're going to go ahead and get the air hose put into the exhaust side first without a rag. There you go. You can see on the exhaust, we do have some escaping air. All the little air bubbles within the size or smaller than the end of a ballpoint pen. Normally speaking, on naturally aspirated engine, of course, all your pressure is going this way, and you're not trying to build boost or anything like that. That would be acceptable if you're doing it at home. This is kind of a backyard way to check to see if your valves are sealing against the valve seats and the surfaces. Now I'm going to pull those springs out. I will actually go ahead and spend a little bit more time on this exhaust valve. Well, I take that back. Let's get the new spring in, because I would run that naturally aspirated, but I'm going to go ahead and get the new spring installed, recheck it, and see what it does. All right, we got the old spring out, sitting right there on the bench. You can see the difference between the springs. That one, of course, being the new one, that one the old one. And we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go ahead and grab my WD-40. Whoops. Make sure she's got WD-40 in there. Good. All right. Tilt it for you there a little bit. There. As you can see, she's got WD-40 all the way around. Grab our air hose, do the same thing without the rag, and see what it does. That right there. We're going to go ahead and pull that valve out, do a little more work with it, and see if we can get to seal up just a tad bit better. Alright, so we got that out. We got that valve seat cleaned up a little bit more. Got it reinstalled with the spring. Go ahead and put some more WD-40 in there. See what kind of progress we made. Got my little air blower here. Again, going through the exhaust side. Already a big improvement. Let's see. A little bit more. There we go. I don't know if you can see it barely, but that is, I got this thing right on the end of the valve. Try and push it through. Let's see if we get a rag put in there. All right. And that's wide open. So unless I got, that's good. Cool. As you saw, much better improvement. Seals way better. That's kind of what I'm looking for. This method isn't like totally accurate, and you're trying to force air through the backside of the valve instead of against the sealing seat. But I don't have anything to pressure up against the front side, so that's how I've been shown how to do it, and it's always worked out real well for me. I've also been told too, or shown, that you're always going to get air bubbles tested this way, but as long as they're the size or smaller than the end of that little ball on the end of a ballpoint pen, you're usually pretty good. So now that these tested out good, I'm going to show you the difference between the springs that I have in there too as well. So I'll get myself set up over here on my little vise, and I'm going to show you the difference in springs. Alright, before I walk over to the little bench there, we're going to measure out my spring installed height. And you measure that, you can use one of these guys here Go ahead and close her up. Make sure it's all the way closed. Hit 0, 0 it out. There you go. So we're going to use this to measure it. And you measure install height from the top of your shim, this being an aluminum head or any other head. Some of them have little shims or spacers underneath the spring. You measure from the top of that shim to right here, the top of the spring. So we'll open this up, get my installed height of my spring here. Find a good place on the head to do it. Oops, get it down. And my install height here is 1.835. Now actually, because the new spring has a cup on it, underneath it there, you can see the difference in the springs. This one does not have a cup. It just sat on a shim, which is how I received the head to begin with, and I didn't know any better then, but I do now. You see the new spring sits on a cup, and I put that little cup on top of the shim that was underneath there to bring my, and I measured the cup, so my install height is, if I get the measure up, is 1.816. That is my install height of my springs. So that's how I determine my spring rate on the seat pressure. So I'm going to walk over here to the bench, get my little camera set up here, and then show you guys the difference in the spring pressures at my install height. So I get set up and we'll do that. Cool. So what I'm using is just this, got this vise from Harbor Freight here. Works out pretty good. And I've got this little tool. It's real simple. Jegs. I believe as I got it from Jegs, it's about, I want to say $80 for this tool. Now if you need something that's real accurate to like the pound, this is not what you want to use. But if you're doing it at home and you want a roundabout or a rough estimate of what your springs are, which is all I do, then you get something like this. You can see it goes up in about, each line is a 10-pound increment. So we'll get my stock spring set up here, the one that came in the head, and we'll squish it to the install height of what's on that head over there. And you'll be able to see the pressure it puts out. So let's go ahead and do that. You want to make sure too you get everything set up in the center. That way you get the most accurate reading possible. Then if you don't, they say it kind of ruins the tool. So always make sure it's all centered up. Now I'll get it on there, get a little pressure, make sure it's centered. Squeeze it just a tad bit. Now all I do is I come off the bottom of the tool to the edge of the vise and go until you get a slight drag on it. So just so you know, I don't know if it's on. Oh, it shut off on you, so I'll turn it on. So you can see my install height is 18176, real close to what mine is. I'll go ahead and squish it down until you get a touch. And right there is right where it touches. Go ahead and pull that off. I'll go ahead and put it back in there. So you can see the fluctuation in the gauge there. See, that's perfect where my install height is. And you can see on the gauge there, it reads 110. Yep, 110 psi. So that's what my seat pressure, or my valve C over there, at my installed height. Now we'll go ahead and take that off. See, make sure she comes back to 0 so you guys can see that. My new spring. Now this is a dual spring. The stock one that came with that head's a single spring with a, I don't know if they call it a buffer, or like a buffer spring, a helper or whatever, but this one is an actual dual spring. You can see it up close. So we'll go ahead and get that installed on the vise here. Get everything set up. Get her centered up. Everything's good to go. Put a little bit of pressure on it. Again, you'll see my install height is 1.8165. So see, it's already climbing, doing good. Right to where it touches. So you can see the wiggle. About where, yep, right there. You can see it starting to wiggle. Now that install height with these springs is just a touch under 150. And that cam calls for a 154 seat pressure. So with these springs, it was the closest I got. And plus the kit, I just bought a full kit to rebuild these heads, all from the same place. They're Pro Comp Speedmaster heads. They're cheap. You can actually buy the heads for $550 on eBay. I've run them for 4 years. This is the second time these have been taken apart, or the first time to do a major rebuild. The first time was just to port match everything. But see, the original springs worked out real well for my original camshaft in the other engine. So, but they would not have worked out well for this cam. But anyways, that's what my seat pressure is, and there's a whole bunch of other dynamics to go into between, like, these springs are good for a 600 lift. With my rockers, I have a 512 and a 523. If I went to 1.6 rockers, then of course I might run into my piston and valve clearance. But these springs are still set up for those rockers, and it still gives me a 100 thousandths cushion between it and a coil bind. I've already squished those and measured them out. There's a bunch of other things, and I'm not 100% sure how to explain it. I have seen a bunch of other guys on YouTube going to way better at explaining it than I am. So, but I just wanted to show you the difference in my seat pressures. These springs will allow my engine to rev up past 6,000. The other springs, it started floating the valves at 5,800. They say with these springs it'd be around 68 to 72, somewhere in there. So I get about another 1,000 RPMs out of the engine. Might not rev it that high. It's a stock engine. So I'm going to keep it around the 6,000 RPM, maybe just a touch over. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get the heads tore back apart, and then we'll go over how I surface the deck of them. Heads tore back down. And I got it set over here back on my little table. As you can see right here, I've got a piece of old granite countertop. I have another piece. Let's walk over here, I'll show you. Another piece sitting up against the little bench here. Part of a bathroom countertop I took out of the bathroom. Cut those pieces off. Pretty flat. And what I've done is it's about 2.5 inch wide strips of 150 grit sandpaper. Laid all the way across, as you can see, with a little bit of gap. Now the gap's there to help catch any of the material and stuff that I do sand off this thing. I don't want it sitting underneath the head, going back and forth with the head. And when I get it set up, I'll show you what I mean. All these little grooves catch that, so it's not constantly or not being held under the head. It has a place for it to go. And let's see. This square, well, it's almost a square. It is roughly 21 inches by 21 inches. You don't have to use granite countertop. I've used metal plates, like 1/2 inch metal plates. I've also used longboards for body work. But I like the idea of having a little square or a little table to set on. That way I get the whole head at once. But yeah, get myself set up here and show you what I'm talking about. Right, get that guy all cleaned up. Close it down really good with WD-40. Helps everything slide across. And I kind of know that some of you might think too 150 is a little aggressive, and I agree with you. But by the time we are done with it and the head's all cleaned, it's worn down to almost, it feels like 1800 grip just by feel. It does wear, well, just like any other sandpaper, the grit does wear down, and by the time it gets all the way through and gets all the way across the head, it's worn down to a point where it feels like it's gonna polish it. So, like I said, just make sure we got plenty of WD-40 on there. Don't be bashful. Soak it down. Lay your head flat, and don't put any major force on one end or another. I just kind of put my head across this, whatever's comfortable, and just run across. Let the weight of the head do its own thing, and go in diagonal areas. Don't go back and forth like this. If you did that and stayed that way and didn't move it around, you'd end up with lines in it from this stuff. So the whole reason I'm going back and forth and alternating is so you can kind of get it on all directions. Oops. And it won't leave the lines in it. So stay pretty close to the center. And just let the weight of the head do its thing. And you can see here it's coming on the outsides. Because I know, and I've measured these heads, the center on this are just a touch up, not any more than like 3 or 4 thousandths. So it's not major, and you can probably get away with it just fine just by putting it on the car and then torquing it down in its circular motion and get rid of that, because 3/4 thousandths isn't a whole lot. But I want to clean it up, make sure everything's got a nice uniform sealing surface to seal against. And then I don't have to worry about it. I like using this block here, or a big flat piece surface, because it gets everything at once. Little sanding boards will tend to want to catch a corner. Some people will force it more on one end to the other because it helps clean. This, you just find an easy spot, let the weight of the head do its job. Every once in a while, pick it up, turn it around. That way, you're not favoring one side or the other. It says there by my little counter, we've been doing this for about 3 minutes. Give it a few more seconds here, and I'll pick it up and give you a close-up of what it's done just by doing this. And I'll show you the finish on the bottom side. Like I said too, go to a nice diagonal. That way all these little lines have a chance to kind of clear out any material that you are cutting off, gasket material, build up from, well, whatever. So. All right. We're almost hitting the 4-minute mark. As you can see, the color on the paper is starting to change, because it's actually starting to move more and more closer to the center. All right. Tell you what, we'll pick it up. Let's see, turn it around. Went ahead and flipped it over for you. I'm going to wipe off the WD-40 from around the edges, around the whole side of the head, and show you what it's doing and where it's cutting, and what to kind of look for by doing it by hand. Alright. Now you can see it all looks fairly the same, but like I said too, I measured it. It's about a few thousandths higher in the center. Like it has kind of a little dish shape to it, and it goes to show you here, as you can see, it's starting to sand just on these edges all the way around. Like it hasn't hit so much here, but it's hit this edge. It's hit this edge here, and you can see coming up So you can see it, yeah, you can see it right there. It's starting to hit those edges. Now another thing I like to look for too is if you come over here and you see where it's hitting right here. See how it's kind of a little bit, it's hitting heavier here than it is here. Same on this side. And you come up here, it's hitting heavier on this edge, but not right here. Come over here, you can see it here too. Now, as long as, from my experiences and what I look for, as long as it's hitting heavy on the outside and getting lighter on both sides, then you're not putting too much force on one or the other. You're pretty much keeping the cylinder head flat. But like I said before too, don't push on the cylinder head. Just let the cylinder head do the job. So I'll get my camera hooked back up and I'll continue cleaning off the surface. And yeah, and I'll show you the finished product. Alright, got the head all cleaned up, looking pretty good, or at least surface all cleaned up. And it only took about $20 of sandpaper and a little over an hour of my time. But, you know, like I said before, probably wouldn't even have to go through all that. It wasn't that far off, but I like to clean it out, just make sure. Plus it did have a couple little nicks in it from when it broke the #1 piston ring in the old engine. Sent through, hit a couple of the cylinders, but they all came out. Nothing else wrong with the cylinder heads. All looks pretty good. But now I got to get her in the old wash tank there, get her cleaned up, get it prepped and ready to put back together. But I'm going to do that here in a little bit. Also want to just kind of go over my little spring rates again with you guys. Hope I didn't scare anybody with all those. Most of the boxes or springs you buy have their installed weights. I don't want to discourage anybody from trying it out. Like you can see this one for this camshaft. See if I can get it to focus in. They want 154 at a 185 install height. No, I got 3. I can't read it. 393 at open, but that's all the way open. That's what they want. It's not what they're going to get. What I have is 30, or I'm at 345 install. And with my rockers, which puts me at about a 512 to 520 lift, puts my open spring pressure at around 320, 330, which is about 50 pounds shy of what they want on these things. So we'll have to change our springs, or we'll get to change our springs in the future. But since I got them, they came with the kit, I'm going to run them. But like I said, yeah, most of the cam cards come with what weights they want. And then the springs you buy, whether from wherever it is you buy them from, will have install, what they put out at different install heights. You can buy the shims, play around with it. But anyways, let me get this head washed up, get her all put back together. I'm going to end the video right here, so the next time you guys see me, we'll be putting the heads, the intake on, getting the top in, the long block pretty much all buttoned up. Get that thing ready to put back in the car. Also got a little surprise for you guys for hanging out with me, subscribing to my channel. Try to do a little bit of a giveaway. So, a couple tools. Help you guys out for watching and hanging out with me. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you're new, please subscribe, turn on notifications, hit that like button for me, share with your friends. Definitely leave a comment, like I said. Anything else you want to know, or maybe I can go in more depth. Anything at all. I greatly appreciate it. Definitely motivates me. Again, thank you guys for hanging out. I'll catch you on the next one.